I needed a low-speed rotary tumbler for a really specific reason. This might be the kind of thing you can buy, but I figured it'd be pretty easy to make one. I just used some PVC pipe for my rollers. I wanted the surface of the PVC to be kind of grippy, so after cutting and squaring the ends, I put each piece onto the lathe to use a piece of sandpaper to scratch it up really nice. The whole point of that was to make a good surface that some silicone sealant I had lying around would stick to. I thinly spread the silicone all over the scratched up pipe. After this dried, I had a pretty good roller. I designed most of the plywood pieces in Shaper 3D and cut them out using a laser. Not only was this a lot quicker than cutting everything out by hand, it also allowed me to realize that my design was a failure sooner. My laser can only really cut through about 1/4 inch of plywood in a single pass, so that's what I made everything out of, and for pieces that I wanted to be thicker, I just doubled them up. My bearings were just a little bit thicker than the plywood, so I had to do a little bit of modification to get them to fit. So the entire reason I'm even putting gears on this is because I wanted both rollers to spin from a single motor, and I needed a way to transfer that force to both rollers. And also I'm going to be powering this with a barbecue rotisserie motor, and I wanted to increase the RPMs a bit. So I'm going to just take a moment to say I am not a mechanical engineer, and I really fumbled my way through this design. While that glue dried, I worked on a drive adapter so I could connect the motor to the contraption itself. The motor's designed to spin a square bar, so I had to make a square end that would key into it. I would have thought that epoxying in some threaded rod to that square piece of wood would work, but as you'll see later, this was not a piece that ended up making its way into the final design. With all the glues and epoxies dried, I started to assemble the machine. So I had made the gears incorrectly and actually slowed the machine down instead of speeding it up. And though those rollers were spinning, they wouldn't have spun for very long based on what I was going to learn on my second attempt. On this attempt, the tolerances were just off somehow, very slightly, and things were not spinning freely enough for me to be confident that a motor could actually turn this thing consistently. And what's more, my self-locking nuts were somehow still spinning on the threaded rod and tightening themselves. So the more I tried to spin this, the tighter it got. I got kind of mad and decided to sleep on it. The next morning, I came up with a new way to do this that simplified things and would end up working a lot better. This time I would find success, but the drive adapter needed to be replaced first. Since epoxy wouldn't hold that little wooden shaft on, I decided to make one entirely out of metal. This is probably how I should have done it in the first place, and further proof that doing it right is often quicker than doing it fast. At this point, I think I can say that the rotary tumbler is working properly, although I did identify one more modification to make. Slight variations or taper in the roundness of whatever is being rolled can cause it to creep forward on the rollers, so I made this little thing to counter that. It's just a little freely spinning vertical roller that will act as a stop if anything creeps towards it. So this is the entire reason I made this. I wanted to coat the interior of these cremation urns with epoxy because nobody likes stale ashes. But I wanted the epoxy to cure while it was in motion so there wouldn't be any pooling at the bottom and have a nice even layer. I've been wanting to make something like this for a while because in the past I've made wooden tankards that were coated on the insides with epoxy to make them waterproof, and I was never really satisfied with the way it was going on if I just brushed it and let it sit. So I let this run for about 12 hours and everything continued to operate just fine, and the epoxy went on and dried very evenly. Now, aside from the application I'm using this for, a rotary tumbler can be used for other things as well. With a faster motor or a different gear ratio, something like this could be used for 3D printing post-processing. Similarly, with the right kind of media, this could be used for rust removal on small parts or else something like rock polishing. Anyway, that's it for this one. Thanks for watching.